Hello everybody and welcome to the third and final part of our Fear Street mini-series, our trilogy of bonus episodes covering Netflix's Fear Street trilogy in collaboration with the Don't Point That Horror at Me podcast. Now hopefully you've already listened to our first two parts, 1994 and 1978, but if you haven't, just so you know, what happens here is we will be discussing the latest Fear Street film, that's 1666, spoiler-free, and discussing what we thought of the movie. Then head on over to Don't Point That Horror at Me, the brilliant podcast hosted by Jill Nolan and Becky Dark, in order to listen to the second half of our discussion where we discuss the movie in spoilerific detail. So what you're about to hear is completely spoiler-free. Here is my discussion with Jill and Becky as we share our thoughts on the concluding chapter of Fear Street. Becky and Jill, hello.
Hello.
Hello, Mike.
How are we all? Becky, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
You've had a heavy week, but you're looking fresh as a daisy.
Fuck off. No, I'm not. I'm absolutely not. You liar. You dirty flatterer, Munzer.
Yeah. Jill, how are you?
No, I'm great. Yeah, no hangover.
Excellent. Me neither. Feeling fresh as a daisy today and very excited to discuss this movie. So let's get straight into it, shall we? Let's discuss the final chapter of the Fear Street trilogy, 1666.
It's been 3 centuries. It stops here. It stops with us.
Your best chance is to run from this place.
Go, go, go! On Shadyside, we're all cursed. The devil is in me.
Any tips for fighting these things?
Try not to die.
Welcome to the suck.
Sarah is a pretty average teenage girl. She has friends, goes to parties, has a crush. But the 1600s weren't a good time for free spirits, and soon Sarah finds herself at the mercy of a town that doesn't understand her. 300 years later, Shadyside is in the grip of a new terror, and Dina, Josh, Ziggy, Sam and Martin must solve the ancient mystery and right the wrongs of the past if they're going to save themselves.
Beautiful. Another perfect R.L. Stein style blurb from Becky Dark there. Thank you very much, Becky. So, Jill, let me come to you first. What did you think of 1666?
I fucking loved it.
Yes.
I don't know about you guys, but yeah, because again, my expectations weren't high because it was 1666 and I didn't quite know what they were going to do with it. But this being a spoiler-free chat, I'm not going to go too much into why I loved it so much. But yeah, I thought it was fantastic end to the trilogy.
Becky, what about you? What did you think?
I think this is my favourite of the three. I really, really loved it. Yeah, I mean, again, like Jill, I'm not going to go into too many details as to why, but it's... I don't know, like it felt like... I'm going to say it felt really authentic, like I was in 1666 and therefore know what that would feel like authentically. But like, I just thought that they struck that kind of feeling of like, you know, the period piece. It just worked really well, even though like it was all of these same faces that we've already seen in like the 90s and the 70s. And yeah, it just really, really worked. And then you kind of, it rounds off the like sort of framing piece with, you know, the kids in the 90s and, you know, trying to solve the mystery and all of that. And I think, you know, it's got the potential to, like, in that way feel a bit clunky. Like, you know, you've got this bit in 1666 and then there's more of it in the 90s or whatever. But it didn't at all. Like, it felt really seamless, really well balanced. Yeah, I just thought it was really great.
Yeah, I completely agree. I loved it. Definitely my favourite of the whole three. It was really fun, wasn't it? And I loved the 1666 stuff, but I loved the way it rounded off, like you said, the trilogy. It kind of felt like a proper... like big final act, a proper climax to the whole trilogy, didn't it? Which was really good. Jill, are you a fan of this? Like, I guess because, you know, compared to the first two, which was doing the whole teen slasher thing, this is doing something a bit different, isn't it? That kind of folk horror, Witchfinder General type stuff. Are you kind of a fan of that sort of type of horror film?
Yeah, I think apart from the obvious homage to Scream in the first one, which was obviously right up my street, folk horror is something that I am more into. So things like The Wicker Man. I did actually watch The Witchfinder General a few weeks ago because it was on Talking Pictures TV. And I got lots of vibes of that when they're in this, when they're sort of searching them for the mark of the beast.
Yes.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah. But what about you, Becky? Are you a fan of this kind of the more folk horror tinge stuff, I suppose?
I really am, actually. And I'm sad that I started podcasting with you, Mike, like after your folk horror series, because I would have.
We've never chatted about folk horror together.
Yeah. But yes, I'm a huge fan, actually, and I think going into the Fear Street trilogy, knowing that there was that witchy angle, and knowing that the third installment was going to kind of go right back to the sort of, you know, witch trials era, that was definitely a selling point for me, and you know, sort of had me excited like from the word go. So it was nice to then watch the third one and for them to like really nail it like that. The whole folk horror feeling was just there, like really sort of that insidiousness of like kind of groups fixating on a belief and, you know, persecuting like one or two people who they have like deemed to be outsiders and all of that. Like, yeah, I just thought it was great. So big fan.
So they did a really clever thing, I think, of kind of shifting the whole subgenre, but keeping it very consistent with the sort of the story and the themes of everything we've seen so far.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it was great that it was sort of a cohesive story all the way through part 1 to 3, but with 3 different sort of pastiche, sort of callbacky, homage type things to completely different genres of horror. And I thought, like you said, it worked really well. It didn't feel clunky, like you said, Becky, or like awkward, or like you're just watching a parody.
No.
But it was, the way it was done was great.
There were genuinely moments in this when you're back in the 1666 that it just felt like a quality folk horror film. It didn't even necessarily feel like, obviously, like it's impossible to watch it without putting those pieces together in your head, because you already know who the characters are and you know the story that's taking place and that kind of thing. But I mean, there were definitely bits where I was just so swept up in the atmosphere of it and the action that was kind of going on that it just felt like I was just watching a new folk horror film. Like, really
definitely.
good.
For me, the bit, and no spoilers, bite my tongue, the bit in the church for me was horrifying.
Oh my
and
God.
I was blown away by that, but we'll get into that.
We should say, like, the director who directed all 3, Lee Janiak, she's done an amazing job, because, you know, I think some of the problems that I had with the first 2, particularly the first one, in that it was kind of so, like I said, sort of almost edited like a music video or something. She knew to completely tone that down for this folk horror one as well. Like you said, Becky, it just looks more like you're looking at a conventional folk horror. It's not really a spoiler to say that it doesn't have any of those kind of needle drop pop songs in any of the 1666 stuff, obviously. And like they play it kind of straight, and they sort of take that genre seriously, I think, don't they, in this. And then you've got all of the actors from the first 2 films together in this, playing... You know, some of them might be playing their ancestors, some of them might just be playing other sort of similar roles, but they've all got lovely Irish accents as well.
Some of them do better than others, put it that way.
Yeah, and I, you know, they're all trying really hard, aren't they? But what did you think, Becky? Did it ever distract you too much, the accents in this?
Not too much. When I first started watching it.
Oh my God.
And they all like first start talking, I was a bit like, but actually, they're not that bad. It's not too distracting, or I didn't find it anyway. So I didn't find that I was like finding it funny all the way through. I think it was just a bit of a like culture shock when I first heard it.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, I mean, they were fine, and they're all quite sort of like, I don't know, like they're not like really, you know, Lucky Charmsing it. Do you know what I mean? They're like, it's quite subtle.
Yeah, I think so. Jill, what did you think? Did they didn't put you off too much, the accent?
No, like Becky said at the beginning, when just they first go back to 1666 and Dina/Sarah starts talking, I was a bit like, Kendra, the vampire slayer.
Yes. It did actually really remind me of like a Buffy or Angel episode
like
when, you know,
flashbacks.
when Angel's doing his Irish accent and they're doing all that, and it's all like horses and carts and that kind of thing. Yeah.
But I forgive it, and like I say, some of the actors did a really good job actually. So I forget what her character name is in this one, but the girl who played Cindy Berman in 78.
Yes.
She's not in it much in this one, but I thought hers was good, and old Solomon as well. I think he did a good job.
I agree.
Yeah, Solomon Good, right?
Yeah.
Played by Ashley Zuckerman, who played Sheriff Nick Good, who we didn't really talk that much about in the first one, but he's kind of slowly become his character has kind of been fleshed out more and more throughout the trilogy, hasn't it? And he's become one of the most fascinating characters, I suppose, across the three films, which we can talk about more in spoilers, I suppose.
I like to just clamp my lips together because
I know.
I found it more difficult to like pick out who the men were. Or like the male characters from the other two films, the menfolk, when they're playing, you know, their ancestors or like townsfolk or whatever, because they're all just like shoulder length hair and beards, kind of essentially. So they just all look really, really similar. But there were a couple I picked out, and I must say, old Sheriff Nick Good, when he goes back and becomes Solomon, he's working that beard, like
hell yeah,
bit of a glow up kind of back in time. But yeah, I really liked the way that some like characteristics of the characters that people played in the first two are kind of like carried over, but again, like not in a sort of I don't know, like really like heavy-handed way, just like, yeah, I don't know, it's just all really well done.
Yeah, I really liked it. And again, I know we mentioned this in our last couple of chats, but it has that Back to the Future vibe, doesn't it? Like the third part, we're going back in time to this kind of period setting, but it also kind of really kind of calls back to the things we've seen already. Like you say, the same actors and the same characters and events kind of reflect events we've seen in 1 and 2 and that kind of thing.
Talking about bad Irish accents, like Michael J. Fox's Irish accent in Back to the Future 3. But yeah, that's such a good call, actually. It is that structure really has kind of persisted, hasn't it, like throughout the trilogy?
It has. They've really gone for that, haven't they? Yeah. And then, so do you think, so other than the folk horror stuff itself, which works really well, do you think it works well as like a satisfying end to the conclusion? Did it round off everything that had been built up in the first two movies to your satisfaction? Jill, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. It was very satisfying, and then sort of hinting at there could be more to come.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was really great that we found out more about Sarah Fear and where it all began, and the twists and turns. I'm finding it really hard to do spoiler free. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I thought it did round off the story well. And yeah, I don't know what to say.
Mm-hmm. Becky, what about you? Do you think it was a satisfying conclusion to this whole saga?
It was for me, yeah. Because like Jill says, like you find out more about Sarah Fear kind of back in the 1666 bit, see all of her story, and yeah, like how the kind of like shady side has sort of become what it is today. And then when you sort of come back to the 90s for the sort of like bookend, I guess, to like the like finish off the current story that we've been following. Like there's an amazing just like final set piece, like really proper kind of like epic end of a horror sort of story, like, you know,
Yeah.
all of the characters sort of thrown in, and, you know, like big.
It's like a kind of graduation day part 2 kind of an ending.
Yeah, no,
That's what it reminded me of.
totally. And like, you know, there's almost like sort of Home Alone type, you know, like kids against intruders and like setting up traps, and a little bit like they did in the first film, actually, but, you know, sort of like on a bigger, grander scale with like more people involved and like blah 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 blah. So like from a kind of satisfaction point of view, that felt like sort of appropriately epic and like really going out on a bang.
Do you think, Becky, and this might be something we maybe should speak about more in spoilers, but like this idea of folk horror is usually more about what makes folk horror scary usually, right, is not so much kind of witches and demons, but it's more about people. It's about people believing freaky, horrible stuff. So The Wicker Man or Witchfinder General. And do you think this does a good job of tapping into that? Because I suppose the first 2 movies have very much been about a supernatural witch / villain, right?
I do know what you mean. And yeah, I think it does. And funny, you actually mentioned like The Wicker Man and Witchfinder General, because I guess out of the sort of unholy trilogy, it's Blood on Satan's Claw that this one pays the most, not like pays homage to, but just like reflects the most, I guess, because that does have that bit more of the sort of supernatural and people like mishmash. And that's what you get here. So it's like, it's definitely people being dreadful to each other,
yes,
but kind of fueled by this like devil worshipy, occulty, possession-y type stuff. But yeah, I mean, for me, I definitely came away from it feeling like, you know, these people are the reason that like all of this stuff is happening. Like, you don't come away from it thinking that like, I don't know, like the devil's the baddie. It's like definitely like it's the people are the baddies, you know?
But they just specify more, it's more men that are baddies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike. You're one of the goodies, don't worry.
It's true though, isn't it? And like, I guess it was teasing at this all throughout the first 2 anyway, but that idea that maybe it is the patriarchy, I guess, like, is the ultimate kind of villain in some ways, and that is definitely something that comes up in folk horror a lot, I think, all the way through to movies like The Witch recently, right? It's that same sort of thing. But we can talk more about all that. Maybe we should wrap it up there then. But like, I guess my last question as well is, for anyone that might be listening to this that hasn't seen the first 2, would you recommend people see this? Could you watch this on its own as like a, you know, if somebody's like, I don't really like teen slashers, but I really like folk horror, could they sit down and watch 1666 just by itself, do you think? What do you reckon, Jill? Could you?
I think they could, omitting the sort of intro and the last half an hour of the film when they're back in 94, because I think as a story it is cohesive, and you do follow Sarah Fear from start to finish. So I think you could, whether you'd enjoy it as much without knowing what they're sort of mirroring and sort of the touch points that have gone through all 3 films. I don't know if you would, but I think you could. There's enough. There's enough there. There's enough story. There's enough gore. The performances are good, bar the accents. Obviously, watching all 3 would be better.
Do you think this works, Becky, in the way that they've like they've deliberately chosen to start with the most recent timeline and go backwards, right? Was that the right way around to do it, as opposed to going chronologically, do you think, and starting part 1 with 1666 and telling this history of this town in chronological order?
I think it does work with this sort of the more sort of like piecing the mystery together part of it, you know? Like, if you just told it chronologically, if you knew the story of Sarah Fear, and then you kind of see what happens at the end of the 1666 portion, and then you were going to go to 78 and see what like the I guess results of that were in 78, and then you went to 94 and kind of caught up with Dina and, you know, the results like that sort of 20-ish years later. be an interesting story to follow, but I don't think it would have that feeling of like,
I guess the reveal.
yeah, exactly.
Because that's what we get in this installment, is the big reveal, and all the pieces of the puzzle come together. So if you started with that, then what have you got?
Yeah, definitely. And then it kind of brings it back anyway. Like, I like that you finish in 94 where you started. So you do, like, obviously go backwards, filling in those puzzle pieces. But then I think it coming full circle, like, structurally works really well.
Cool. There you go. So big thumbs up all round for this one.
Thumbs up.
Is this, Jill, was this, I know me and Becky said this was our favourite. Is this your favourite, or are you still Team 94?
I think what I need to do is watch them all again, straight through.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think going into the first one, not really being sure what to expect, and it was all new. By the third one, you sort of settled into the world and the characters and the story. So I did feel like I enjoyed this one the most, and because you get the satisfaction of everything being resolved, I guess.
Yeah.
Or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm definitely going to do a big rewatch of all three, marathon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so as well. Becky, are you going to revisit them, do you reckon?
I'm going to go around to Jill's and snuggle on her sofa and watch them.
Yeah.
Yes! Can I come as well?
Yes, of course.
We'll order some pizzas.
Well, we
amazing.
can listen to the Pixies, eat cheeseburgers, and then instead of making out, we can just watch the trilogy.
Yeah.
We'll watch this. Yeah.
Or maybe our respective partners can join us. Do that in a corner somewhere.
Exactly. We'll do that part in our own time.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, guys, thank you so much. And for everyone listening, now you can now head on over to Don't Point That Horror at Me to hear our spoiler section. So, guys, remind us where we can find your podcast for the rest of the discussion.
So we are Don't Point That Horror at Me. You can find us on all the normal podcast places. If you want to find us on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, we are @PointHorrorPod. I think that's it.
Perfect. Guys, thank you very much.
Thanks, mate. Pleasure.
And that's it for this week's spoiler-free chat on Fear Street 1666. But don't forget, head on over to Don't Point That Horror at Me podcast, which you can find in all the normal podcast places, and listen to the second half of our discussion as we discuss 1666 in spoilerific details and discuss our final thoughts on the trilogy as a whole. Thank you so much for listening, and join us again soon for another episode of The Evolution of Horror.